only been talking about the early poetry, and we haven't been talking about an awful lot of the serious political poetry and the Galway poetry that dates from some of his times at Coole Park. The door handles on the church here are a gift from the Yeats Society of South Australia to the community here, and it's two beautiful swans. It's the black swan of Australia and the white swan of Yeats's poetry in his middle years, which was a very important motif for him. But born in 1865, eldest of 4 children, who definitely did give a tongue to the sea cliffs, fully fulfilled their father's dream, that they are determination that they would be famous. Elizabeth and Susan and Elizabeth are very important handcraft workers, hand-printed books, all sorts of arts and craft things, and Jack is our most important artist. Yeats is madly in love with Maud Gonne for all those years. Maud Gonne marries a guy called John McBride, a drunken, vain, glorious lout, according to Yeats, which is pretty harsh. But he redeemed himself by going out in the 1916 revolution and being one of those leaders that was executed. Yeats immediately moved back in and asked Maud Gonne would she marry him. He could now afford to. And she said, no, don't be silly, you're 50 and I'm 50, and no, we're not doing that. She had a daughter, Iseult, whom she had already had before he met her at all. She was variously described as her ward or her companion or whatever. And Iseult was only 19 or 20, and Yeats appealed to her to marry him. And he spent a year and a half chasing her, and on the rebound almost, married a lady called Georgie Hyde-Lees, who was an English lady who was deeply, deeply involved in theosophy and seances and the Order of the Golden Dawn and all sorts of things that Yeats and Maud Gonne had been deeply involved in. And she's 25 and he's 52. And he believes his career is finished, that the work is done and that things are fine. And on their honeymoon, she thinks to herself, I've just married the most famous poet in the world, and I really can't just be a young bride to him. I must be of more help to his incredible artistic character. And because she had been involved in seances and so on, she sat to the table, and however it initially began, the first 12 pages are missing, which is always a puzzle about this. But she started automatic writing, and spirits from the other world started talking to Yeats through her, or so Yeats believed, and so the conversation continued. And 3,500 pages later, 5 years later, he has reinvented himself all over again. There's a whole other pile of poetry coming through, Crazy Jane poems and the poems of Michael Robartes, and he tries to synthesize all that he has learnt in these 3,500 pages into a book that he calls A Vision, trying to synthesize and bring together the philosophy of poetry and of the spirit world in a way for man to live. I don't know of anyone who has ever read it fully and then followed it, but it's a very important book, and he has revitalized his whole life. He wins the Nobel Prize in 1923. Georgie gives him, incidentally, Smiley, the editor of the Irish Times, rang him and said, Yeats, you've won the Nobel Prize. You know what Yeats said? How much? It was the first time in his life he actually had the full comfort of having money. Georgie gave him 2 children, Anne Yeats, an artist who died about 10 years ago and never married, Michael Yeats, who became a senator himself. Yeats was a senator from 1923 until 1928. He became a senator himself and then a member of the European Parliament for Ireland. He died about 6 years ago, and his wife only died in April last. So they have 4 children, one of whom, Pádraig Yeats, lives in Ohio. Anybody here from Ohio? No. And nobody even laughed. I think the idea of a poet laureate's son ending up as an engineer in Ohio says something. I never know what it is, but I think it says something. And his daughter Katrina, Michael Yeats' daughter Katrina, meaning William Butler Yeats' granddaughter, is a cellist in an orchestra in Copenhagen and is the patron of the Yeats Society here in Sligo. We have a big international summer school every year with 75 students from all over the world this year, from South Korea, from Japan, from all over the States and Canada. And they're very supportive of everything that we do. In his later years, his health was declining, and he went to live in the south of France in the winter months, much like you might go to Florida for the winter and then move back up north in the summertime. And in 1938, he knew he was close to dying. He was 74, and just incidentally, Seamus Heaney, who died only recently, we have had 4 Nobel Prize winners: William Butler Yeats, George Bernard Shaw, then Samuel Beckett in the 60s, and then Seamus Heaney, who only passed away 3 weeks ago. And it's kind of interesting. Yeats died at 74 in 1939. Heaney died at 74, was born in 1939 and died at 74, and shared the same birthday with Samuel Beckett. Different year, but the same birthday. So there's curious things there. I think there are Celtic auguries out right now looking for our next Dalai Lama. But, so anyway, he's in the south of France, and he knows his health is giving up, his heart is failing, and he writes his last poem. There's 2 last stanzas in it that I like to give people, and the last stanza itself gives very clear instruction as to what is to happen for where he's to be buried. But the second last and then the last. Irish poets, learn your trade, sing whatever is well made. Scorn the sort now growing up, all out of shape from toe to top. Their unremembering hearts and heads, base-born products of base beds. Sing the peasantry and then hard-riding country gentlemen, the holiness of monks and after, porter drinkers' randy laughter. Sing the lords and ladies gay that were beaten into the clay through 7 heroic centuries. Cast your mind on other days, that we in coming days may be still the indomitable Irishry. Under bare Ben Bulben's head, in Drumcliff churchyard Yeats is laid. An ancestor was rector there long years ago. A church stands near, by the road an ancient cross. No marble, no conventional phrase. On limestone quarried near this spot, by his command these words are cut. Cast a cold eye on life, on death. Horseman pass by. He died the following spring in 1939. He, in Rockbrunn, a small village outside Monte Carlo on the Mediterranean. He was interred there because the war was on, and he instructed Georgie to inter him there, and then after the war to quietly bring him back and do what was said in the poem. And in 1948, an Irish naval corvette went out to I presume Marseille, or Nice maybe, and collected the body and brought it back here. And he had a civic, not a state burial, but he did have a civic burial here in 1939. Georgie lived until 1968, and she's buried with him as well. So it's just outside on the right-hand side. There's a nice coffee shop and a bookshop, and there's also a 9th century Celtic cross and the remains of a round tower. If anybody is interested in it, it might be cold and windy, you might not want to worry about it, but I'll be over there at the coffee shop, and the restrooms are available there whether you're buying or selling. Okay?
Great, thank you.